We're ready. We're doing it.
Yes.
How's your week on?
Pretty good. You know what? I haven't gotten much done, so no. Not as productive as I hoped. How about you?
We're trying. We're really, really trying. Big Game is doing really interesting stuff. I've been working on some amazing stuff around cards and battling that has been really racking my brain of how to be find the uniqueness within that and within that sphere. And a very difficult process to have, I guess, right? It's a difficult question to deal with when you're on the platforms that I'm working on. Uh, there's a lot of intrinsics that people just want to grab onto and gravitate towards, but I'm just constantly ever fighting the MDA side of things right now, where it's like everybody's coming at it from the mechanic side. I'm trying to come at it from the aesthetic side and trying to find this resolve on the in between of like what is the context here, like what are we actually doing, and how does that then fill into the greater side of things, and can that help us drive a north star a little bit more rather than just being like, hey, let's keep going until we find the fun. And I don't know, like I'm seeing definitely a different side of of this continuous loop and iteration of just jumping on top, jumping on top, jumping on top, and you know what I mean. It's definitely curious. It's funny. It's a different way for me. You would think that like this is the most natural way to make a game, right? But to me, it's not necessarily. Um, and my brain usually jumps to some of the further afield points and then starts scrolling backwards rather than starting at some smaller point and then moving forward from there, because I just find that if you can be on, if you can find a north star, aim for the north star, a seed of something, right, and then build into that rather than uh, just always building on a foundation and trying to just always just build up from there, right? Like, because you never know how shaky your foundation might be, right? Or you might find something or discover something later on that then you're like, oh well, that was cool. Why didn't we just do that? And now all of a sudden you've done like 10 iterations and you've already gone like kind of away from even ever being able to really get back to there, right? Without changing like a whole heap of stuff, right? But those are the things that you're kind of afforded at different times at different companies, and I do appreciate that quite a bit, at least. You know what I mean? Being able to be allowed to be thoughtful about your design, really think about it, really get in, really dive deep down a rabbit hole, and then kind of come out and say, do you know what? We didn't really learn anything, or like you know what I mean, or we didn't really find anything. I think is like a totally fine thing to do. It's just that you know what I mean, on the independent side, like you just don't have that time. You don't have that. You're not allowed to have that. So you have to be very concise, very predictive, very understanding about like here is where I am and here's where I need to go somewhere else, right? And I need to do some bigger things. How does that happen, right? And
You
um,
know, actually, you kind of reminded me why I was more unproductive because in the beginning of a project, you can take giant leaps of holistic design to move towards a vision, and then you start taking smaller and smaller steps as you're trying to fine tune your game. But I think at some point, as you realize that your smaller steps aren't working, the question is exactly what you said: is like, can you or should you go back to bigger steps to figure out why your game isn't fun? And man, that is sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, that you've been on the wrong direction for a while. So I totally understand what you're saying.
yeah, and look, you know what I mean. I wouldn't doubt our idea of productivity is different, right? Like I would say that like I don't measure productivity by just pure output, but a lot of times I will. I have to remind myself that it's not about pure output. Like I spent an entire day over the weekend coding in Python to try and fix a bug in a tool that I wrote for myself, and I ended up not being able to fix that tool at all. And I spent a solid fucking 5.5 hours of just sit down time right in front of me, not being able to do it, just racking my brain, just being like, why am I not able to do this? And it ended up not being like wasn't even a problem in terms of like, oh, I don't I don't understand, or I don't know how to. It was, I didn't know how to do the file manipulation that I wanted to do. Like take a JSON file and just add to it. That's all I wanted to do. And like cognitively sounds like really, really simple. But the JSON is serialized, so it's comes in through a list, and then is a list of objects then within there, and that should be really theoretically fine. But I was breaking on stupid packages like, that should be really, really simple to implement. And you're looking at all the Stack Overflow tutorials, and everybody's just like, all you do is JSON dot blah, and I'm like, great, doesn't work here. I don't know why, and I couldn't really figure it out. So it was one of those things where I spent a bunch of time, didn't learn a whole lot, but at least I put in the work, I guess, right? You know what I mean? I don't know if that's working. It's definitely working not smarter. It's definitely working a lot dumber than anything else. But you mean, tell me, like, was it? We've been also you've been working a really hard and really close to the edge right now for a hot minute too. Like, I wouldn't doubt that
Yeah.
just taking a cycle away from everything like helps. Like, I don't know how you feel about that. Like sometimes I feel like being super super immersed is the only way for me to really like make better decisions. Like, I have to be churning on that problem 24/7, like in the shower, at the dog park, in the notepad. Like, I have to just be on that problem the whole time to be able to really get something out of it. If I pull myself away, I have this like lag time period of like time that I have to then rebuild that mental map and like back frame myself back into that discussion in my head.
Yes, I am actually very similar. There's a lot of people who will say, yeah, you should take time away from the problem, and of course there's various creativity like models sort of around that tell you to do that. But I don't know, just an experience, you should at least have it be a focus, and then maybe when you're like, I don't know, playing other games or something, it's still on your mind, and then it'll help formulate an answer. So
Hmm.
I too think you should throw yourself at the wall as much as relatively possible.
A big portion of that today, or over the last couple of days, was actually trying to find some more reference games and trying to just go back and play some stuff. So, like, I really wanted to play back to Diablo 3 to just feel out characters, AoEs, combos of gear, talents, skills, gems, and set bonuses, and just really reframe myself around like, what does it mean to have consistent progression, looter scooter type of stuff, you know what I mean? In that dungeon crawler setting, but it's not, it wasn't necessarily about dungeon crawling or any of those other things. It's just, what's that incremental power really feel like to the player, and how can you also make that very simple rules compound nicely, right? And
Yes.
that led me. We've had many a talk about Vampire Survivor, and I have completely written off everything about this game, and then I played it for a total time of 13 minutes
Okay,
before
I want to hear
before I
your
rage
experience.
quit.
Give me your experience.
Okay, so let's see. Um, Getting in, it's just felt obviously very Archero like, right? Like, we are in roguelike. We have this outer meta that is permanent upgrade boosts, right? A la like a bunch of different what are they called, Smosh games? You know what I mean? When you have like the little like plane and it's 2D and like Galaga, right? Like when
Oh, okay. Yeah.
um
Oh, shmup,
Shmup,
maybe.
that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. So like a lot of those games on mobile have, to try and increase replayability, like, and to constantly push you down the track further and further and further, right? Will give you those permanent upgrades as you play through the main game. So you're just always constantly pushing down that line. Starting off into the game is rough. You start off with nothing, and
Little whip.
little whip, and that you have no directionality over that thing other than like your positioning of like which way you're facing. It doesn't go like in a 2D 360 game. It only does 90 to the left, so you're at a real big disadvantage right out of the gate. So in the first instance, I ended up losing a lot of HP just trying to figure out how to wrangle the mobs around me, right? So that I could tether them, keep them with me, but also then get them into a position that I could actually swing and strike at them. And then from there, then obviously, then they drop these XP orbs. Those XP orbs then are, extremely necessary to be able to continually grow your power, and then kind of, you know, move up through the levels and everything like that from there. Um, my character is so goddamn slow that I was surprised that I had no like autonomy over the attacking like at all as well too. So like the only thing that I was doing was just moving around and kiting mobs, and I'm like I have done this 100 million times before, so I got it instantly. I got in and was just like, okay, what are we doing here? Um, Started hitting a few things. I got up to like level 3 pretty quick. Went through some of the upgrade paths. Started getting some of the projectile upgrades and just trying to like fill out my character with more interesting stuff. Right. I got these.
And how do you feel? How did you feel as you got each upgrade or any upgrade?
Yeah. So the books that float around you. Now this is the thing again. Stuck in like basic 1 to 10 range. So my hope is that obviously over time that these things do compound into something kind of interesting, right? Uh, but I didn't feel that. But the simple compounding was kind of there, which is obviously the nice thing, right? So I got books that float around me, very much felt like Binding of Isaac's type of style, but they're not there permanently. They're only there for like a couple of seconds. They spin around, they hit some things, they don't deal a lot of damage. All the base stats are all really raw and small, so it's like, okay, cool. Like I'm still in that struggle zone, in the first 10 levels. Again, and still with my stupid whip that's just facing in one direction, not doing anything else. So I just kind of felt helpless. I felt like I couldn't actually take on the hordes that then started to increase and started to come get me. And it wasn't about necessarily about skill or positioning so much as just understanding some of the other base mechanics that you have with at your disposal. So like it took me until playtest 2 to actually start hitting the flames and hitting the statues. I was always wondering, like, okay, like, where am I going to get health from? Like, I'm not getting health in any of the upgrades. I'm not getting health in anything else. I survived on just, like, 2% HP for a solid, like, 4 levels or something like that within that first playtest. Because I got absolutely crippled by a massive flock of uh, bats that just like came at me, and they come at you from off screen slash on screen, and if you can get around them, but if your character's on that super super perpetual slow, it's like you're getting hit. You're gonna get kind of knocked around the place, especially if you're not like very diligently kiting mobs into a circle or something like
Right.
that, right? So it felt like there was extremely optimal play that I didn't necessarily want to do. So first things first, I just went off and started exploring. Found out that there is
Big
no
mistake.
there is no edge of the map. The map just keeps moving, keeps scrolling, and I keep ending up in kind of like back in the same place. That was definitely curious. I couldn't tell if more or different mobs were spawning just because I was moving further away from spawn point, or if I was moving, or if I was just increasing in level over time. I couldn't really tell, but that's what you get for 13 minutes worth of gameplay. Um, and then I died. Yeah, and I died with not a whole lot. I had 2 books that were floating around me that were only there for 30 seconds and then would go away for like 3 or 5 seconds and then come back, and then they wouldn't deal all that much damage. I ended up getting this fire thing, the potion that would just, like put an AoE on the floor and everything like that. And I think I just increased the power of my whip by some scaling portion. Right, so I didn't get to the end game. I didn't even get to the mid game and any of that. But let's just say then round 2, okay? Round 2, I'm back at the loading screen. I decide to buy I have a little bit of cash now. I decide to buy the two other characters. One of them I end up playing. The next is like the mage range character, and the projectile stuff. So I was like, okay, I feel a little bit more at home here. I still don't have autonomy over the precision of the projectile itself, but I think that I can influence this. I think that I can make this work, right? Um, I end up getting daggers, and I get two daggers that fire out from my character.
Yeah. Oh man, I hate the daggers. I want to hear your opinion.
So I'm literally kiting a group of like 7 mobs, and the fucking dagger starts shooting at off angles at this other character that's further away and on its own. And I'm like, what is the targeting for this thing? I was just like, who coded that? Like, what's happening? Like, don't just pick a random fucking target. And it couldn't have been random because it was picking the one that wasn't in the group, the only one that wasn't in the
Yeah.
group. So I was like, fuck's sake. All right, this is
Let me
fucking
give you the
useless.
spoiler. Let me give the daggers shoot where you're moving, the way you're facing, which means generally away from the people that are chasing you, which is why I hate them. But it's hard to tell. It's
No, they
hard. It's
don't.
really hard. Yeah.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't.
I'm just messing with you. It's
Heavy doubt.
totally.
Heavy doubt. Heavy doubt. I will have to do some serious investigating after this. But no, they don't. They definitely don't. I mean, nothing necessarily felt like too much, too much different than in this play round, right? I'm in the same position again within that levels 5 to like levels 10 range. I am just underpowered. There's too many things coming at me, and I have no autonomy over the actual like attacks that I'm doing. I'm just getting upgrades, and I'm just hoping that those upgrades are going to increase my power to a point where then I feel comfortable. But that's the goal of the game, is to not make the player feel comfortable. So as the player's power scales, the game scales, right? And then that's where then obviously precision of choice, what upgrades you went into, and not going into like a breadth of upgrades, but like more depth of upgrades, so that you can have that, maybe that dagger one shot enemies at the later things, and not, take 30 arrows to go and like actually do the job. But I didn't get to the visual spectacle. I didn't get to the I didn't get to the mid game. I didn't get to any sort of boss rounds. I didn't get to any sort of big intermediate like wave clears. I found myself disconnecting so quickly on round 2 that I actually just stopped looking at the screen, because all I was doing was just moving around. Like, I don't care to just WASD around an infinite map and then hope that I kill things, right? And then pick up blue orbs. Like, that's all it felt like, you know what I mean? And I just didn't find any of that gripping at all. So obviously I think I need to give it more time. Obviously need to get a little deeper into the actual product to be able to like really definitively like make my feelings really solid. But I will go back to the same thing where I will just say that there's just not a whole lot there. I think it's a whole lot of nothing. I think it's a whole lot of linear progression of upgrades and just adding, and not a whole lot of anything else. And that different enemy types don't matter. If I,
Oh, not at all.
you know
The
what I
bat,
mean?
the swarm of bats is actually the most interesting thing, and you probably saw that in like the first 30 seconds or whatever.
Yeah. So, you know what I mean? I don't get it. I'm old, I guess, right? I don't get it. Uh, I just think that, you know what I mean? But hey, whatever. It was $4.99, right? But I feel like that there are just better roguelikes out there. There are just better games that do better upgrades, that just have better gears, that just make things a lot more interesting, right? Like, I don't know why I would play this over any of the Binding of Isaac games. I don't know why I would necessarily sink 20 hours into this product, right? You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
because it's not exactly an idle game either. Like you actually have to you do have to interact with at least the movement mechanic to keep yourself alive. But like, is there ever an activatable ability? Is there ever any autonomy that you have? It's just literally just move around a swarm and just
Yep.
try to survive.
That is correct.
Yikes.
So I will say first off that
Look,
really is a. Oh wait, if you have final words, sorry.
final words. There is a craft there, right? The intro screen is nice. It definitely takes you back to that retro side of arcadiness. One more quarter, one more quarter, one more quarter. There is definitely a breadth of gameplay that once you get into a loop, that it will just keep kind of continuing that thing for some amount of time. But the lull to get to that point of entertainment and fun, it takes longer and longer and longer. Obviously, that's what the meta system then is supposed to keep that game session truncated to be like this amount of time, rather than, hey, every time that I want to make deeper and deeper progression, that it takes longer and longer. Um, and I think that there is obviously some sort of craft in there that is resonating with people that is not resonating necessarily with me. But fair play to the developer for at least putting it out, and congratulations on their success. You know what I mean? I think that just because one idiot doesn't understand doesn't mean that it's a complete fucking write off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I wanted to say that was one of the best reviews I've seen for the game. In fact, that was the best review I've seen for the game from somebody that doesn't like a game. Honestly, in general, because when somebody doesn't like a game or doesn't get the game, they also have a lot of trouble dissecting their play experience. Like when somebody loves Zelda, they're like, oh yeah, they could go on and on for hours about why they love Zelda. But when they don't like a game, they're just like, oh yeah, I just don't like it. It's like a very short conversation, and it's difficult to get something useful out of it. But the way you're able to even break down something that you don't like, at least there's a lot of things I think people can, especially a dev, can hear that feedback and do something about it.
Like possibly, like again, we could fucking harp on this, in general. I think for me personally, there's just not the level of choice that I want, right? I don't feel like upgrades had any sort of meaningful choice. I don't think that I think over time, once you had five of those things, now you felt like that there was meaningful choice at that moment, but I didn't feel like getting to there that I could feel smart whenever I picked a new upgrade. I didn't feel like any of the paths were necessarily wickedly useful. Obviously, they need to compound with each other to make more interesting things, and there's probably some other layer that I'm completely missed by only getting in for 13 minutes. But you know what I mean? That's where I got in 2 rounds, right? I died off pretty quick because I got bored. I got bored because I
Right.
could only just move around and just pick new things and just pick up blue orbs. And then as soon as I disconnected and started going back and like looking at my phone and being like, okay, well, what other bullshit do I have to do today? I just instantly just was that's when I started taking damage. As soon as I started taking damage, then I'm like, where's the health? I don't see health in the upgrades. I started attacking environmental stuff. I maybe find health. I found health one time. Um, so it just instantly, I'm just like, okay, I guess I go to the next loop. I don't know. You know what I mean? And then I knew I could do that and then just invest in the meta and automatically increase my power. But like, that's not what I'm looking for here, right? Like, I'm looking for mastery within a space. And I
Yeah,
didn't
you
feel like I
probably
was master.
recognized the grind at that point. You
Yeah.
saw it and you're like, okay, yeah, that's what I figured. Um, yeah, and a very quick preface because we've mentioned Vampire Survivors probably like at least 5 episodes
Yeah.
now, but I do want to emphasize something to devs out here. You have to under. Oh God.
I'm kidding.
Uh,
I have the worst lighting solution in the entire world. I have to get one of these fucking ring lights. It's so bad, dude. I'm in
yeah,
black. I'm in total darkness if I don't do this, and if I'm not, I'm getting beamed out from like the left hand side.
you
Like
look like the hard comics with the harsh black and white lighting to look
so
edgy and stuff.
horrendous. Anyway, derailed.
But yeah, I'm gonna say, as a dev, you need to, especially if you want to be a really great designer, you gotta look at this game, because this game is, I mean, it's, I'm pretty sure it's still dominating the mobile market right now, still dominating the Steam indie market. There's obviously something there, and at the same time, you got to look at bigger games too, like Call of Duty, which even I have been looking at lately. I'll talk about that later, maybe, but you got to look at the whole spectrum, because it is kind of a big gap, I guess, between these sorts of games.
Absolutely.
I do have a question about preferences. Have you enjoyed an idle game before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, there was some idle RPGs that we would play at Backflip that a colleague of mine put me onto that could just sit in the background, and you literally built an RPG character that would go through dungeons, and you saw it go through that dungeon like isometric wise in like a little window.
Ah,
That was a
okay.
lot of fun to interact with, right? Like you're just, but some of the decisions were like, okay, when do you want to send your character to the next level? Right? Like, okay, now I feel powerful enough at this level. I feel like I've gotten everything at this tier. Okay, now it's time to go to the next thing. Now it's time to go to the next thing. Now it's time to go to the next thing. And yes, you could sit in level 1 and kind of grind it out for a while, but you wouldn't see the breadth of the game in those ideas. But it allowed you to subset into, when do I feel like I'm comfortable? Like when am I feel like my character is comfortable to move to the next thing? The gear progression there was nice because even though it was an idle game and the character is playing itself and casting its own abilities and everything else like that, I still had autonomy over what gear is my character working with right now, and do I feel again powerful enough to be able to move to the next tier, to the next level? Do I feel like I have a build that is, valuable enough to be able to take out, the next stuff? And then I was always then constantly seeking that progression of like, what does the next tier give me? What is the next, set of abilities? What's the next set of talents? And there was a decently deep tree of things that you could end up doing. I remember there was like a druid character that you could get like a pack of bears that would follow around with you, and over time you could up if you subset down into that like beast mode type of area that you could go from one bear up to that four up to five, and basically then you were like you had tanky companions that were always with you, but you didn't have a lot of survivability yourself, right? You were putting a lot of effort into keeping your bears alive more than keeping yourself alive. So there was trade-offs there that were very apparent, and they were apparent based off of the gear, the stats, how much HP pool you have, are you a face tank, are you doing this, blah blah blah. So a lot of that RPG tropes came out, but the gameplay was just automated. But the decision
Right,
points,
right.
right, of like, when do I go deeper from like the roguelike side of things was all still there, which I think is perpetually like one of the, it's just one of those like bigger ideas, right? Do I sit here and grind on level 1 rats until I'm level 3 before I go to level 2, and then I get that onus, or do I just kill the 2 3 rats, unlock the gate, go to level 2, kill 2 3, and then keep going, keep going, keep going, right? So
This does lead me to a question. This is a serious question that I think most people would be surprised I'm asking, but I actually don't really know the answer right now. The question is, how much does player choice matter in a game? And over the years, I've been, I mean, I used to totally subscribe to Sid Meier saying games are a series of interesting choices. And over the years, I don't know how true that is anymore, because not only my preference in games can slide away, but you see some meta systems. I don't know if anybody's played like Arch Hero. So in Arch Hero, or in any RPG, you generally have some sort of, where do you want to place your money to upgrade your stats. But actually, in Arch Hero is now a totally linear tree. For example, just like you always get HP here, you always get more damage here, and there's quite a tolerance for linear meta systems. Um, So I don't know the importance of a lot of choice at the moment. So I want to hear what you think on that.
For sure. So like I think that there's like a big watching your talk as well too, right? Like you instantly call the games that your friends were playing in college, right? Like you call them games,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Everybody else around you was like, this is not a game. And I
Yeah,
think
let
that
me give some quick
yeah.
context for the viewer. So, yeah, recently I came across a concept called predictive processing, and this is a relatively new cognitive science idea where we as humans, um, we when we see uncertainty, we aim to reduce it. Basically, we're always our mental model of the world. Our brain wants to get us better at predicting things because the better you predict the world, the more successful you can be at it. So, in an idle game, it argues that we are watching all these numbers go up, and every time we hit a new upgrade, it's surprising to us, and we're not really sure what's driving that. So this is a very rough like explanation for a really advanced concept, but basically we want to be surprised, and then we want to figure out the, the cause of that surprise. So, but go on.
No, totally, right? So a lot of that to me is not necessarily about play, right? But it is I am inside of a world. And where where we where we like to be, right, in terms of people in general, in terms of our mental model. And I can go into the whole thing of how to grow, like where we're growing that, like visualize that if we want to. I can get into that, but the biggest thing for me there is like I am unlocking a new place of uncertainty and intrigue. What's
Yeah.
happening here? Okay, that's a world to itself. What's going on in that world? Oh, that character just got this next upgrade. Okay, then what happens next? Okay, but where is that character going to go now? And I think if you look at then players and AI modeling, right, in general, we love poking and prodding at AI because we love to try. They intrigue us as this individual entity that is onto itself. It is this new, unexplored territory and land that we need to get into to understand, and
Absolutely.
that want to understand and that intrigue there of like, okay, well, where is this going? Like, how deep does it go? Like, what's going to happen next? Where, what, I mean, is there new territories? Is there new lands? Those are the things that we're watching for. We're trying to build that model of understanding of what the game loop what the game loop is doing. But in doing so, we're not necessarily playing, but we're inside of the world. And when we talk about just games in general, right? Like play is a rule-based world. When you watch children play, right? We're talking about tag, we're talking about cops and robbers, we're talking about any of these types of games, these schoolyard games, these anything. The rule set crafts a world around the individual. And it's up to you as the adult or the other player to step into that world, to be able to get in, to understand. And you actually have to be cognitively in that world and accepting of those rules to be able to play. Like that's how play forms. The
Yeah.
moments that, if you're on the playground and we're playing tag, right? And you and I intrinsically know what the rules of tag are. Like I run, I'm it, I tag you, you're now it. But what happens if you tag me and then I tag you back? Like, oh, all of a sudden, if we don't agree and align on what the rule is there, play breaks. The world breaks. The world shatters. Right? We're not playing tag anymore. We're not in this altruistic world of wherever we've made our mental things, right? We're not doing that anymore. Now all of a sudden play has become unfair and we need to resolve that rule. So now all of a sudden we have, okay, no tag backs. Now we have the 3-second rule. Oh, I'm tired. I'm fat. Like, you're really fit. So it's like, of course you're going to beat me every single time. Well, it's like, okay, well then now we need safe zone, right? Where I can, and, oh, but you're in the safe zone, you've been there for like an entire minute, or you keep being in the safe zone and then not being in the safe zone, not being in the safe zone. It's like, we need to resolve those rules. And in doing so, we continue to build the rule space of play, and we continue to expand on our own understanding of what it means to be fair and fun and intriguing within that world. And that's the only way that then play continues to form and continues to kind of cycle within those moments. So when we're looking at that idle game, right, and we're looking at this progress bar that's moving up, and we're looking at this character, and the character, maybe there's a text output and it says, the character has a decision, go north, east, west, or south. And all of a sudden it goes north, and then it ends up in a town. You're like, okay, well, cool. What's this town about? All right, how deep is that town? Is there a bunch of stuff that can be done here? Okay, but you've stepped into that world. So you're really just watching the output and kind of watching the story unfold, a lot like Dwarf Fortress, right? You're watching this emergent space or trying to think of this as an emergent space. When in reality, in fact, it could just be a big data model of this world that has a bunch of things that a character can interact with or do, and then a heuristic that just says, "Well, I'm in position B, therefore, and ultimate goal is power. Then how do I get that through X, right? Or like, you know, so we want to poke and prod at these models to be able to understand them deeper in the same sense of like an AI chatbot that we talk to and we'll just try and poke and prod at. Like how many times that like people are going to go and say like, "Hey Siri, make a fart joke." Like, "Hey Siri, you know what I mean, tell me about the universe. Hey Siri, like tell me about self," right? It's because we're trying to poke and prod at the boundaries of these individual things, and our intrigue is when we have that little bit of an input there, right? Or that little bit of a nuance. Once you've actually kind of seen the same town again, once you've seen the understanding of like, oh, okay, well, health is low, attack damage is not there, the character is valuing potions, therefore it's like dipped out, gone to the nearest town. It's like, okay, I've kind of figured out cognition wise of like, what is that AI bot going to do in that moment? And then that by itself has like increased my mental model, right? Like I have now looked at that space, stepped into that world, and then seen what it's for, and now I can step out of it, right? Now I can, I've churned, right? Now I've moved away, and I think to me that is a bigger portion of why those things are intriguing to individuals more than anything else. Our perception drives into those fields, right? But we have to do that by stepping into that world a little bit more and seeing like what is it about. Um, even if we don't get to take an action within it.
No, that's very insightful. I kept thinking about your experience with Vampire Survivors as you were saying that, and it was kind of like you're saying you were playing Vampire Survivors, and the term for play and being in that imaginary world is magic, the magic circle. So if it seemed like you were playing this game and you kept getting pushed out of the magic circle, you're like in a playful state, but like the way the game was designed kept pushing you out until you eventually were out of the circle, and you're like, I don't really care to play this anymore with this rule set.
Yeah, yeah, theoretically, absolutely. I could see also then where it was going and what the increase was, and that didn't intrigue me. So if I don't have autonomy over action and I don't have better decision points there, right? I don't have necessarily like the most interesting choices for me, then I've already seen what the world has to give, right? And I can see past what it's going to give me, and then it kind of doesn't matter if it like might change. I already know that the rule structure's there and set and structured, so I'm stuck. And I know that I'm just going to be doing that. So it's like, okay, cool. Then it's just going to increase, level up, move on. And I'm not moving out of this world. I'm not moving to a town. I'm not having rest points in between or making choices of when I go to the next dungeon. I'm not having choices on like, okay, well, what necessarily like what gear I have other than these level upgrade positions that feel very automated, and once you've chosen three at the very start, feels like you need to really like hardcore subset into exactly those ones and continue that track for the life cycle of your round, because if you don't, breadth is going to kill you more than depth on individual things. So it it just pulled. I think like there at that point, I'm like, okay, I have seen what this rule set is going to give me, and I'm deciding to not necessarily interact with it right at that
Yeah.
moment.
No, yeah, again, very good point. Because when you, if for somehow, if somehow the game gave you the same vocabulary that Link has in Zelda, and let's just say Breath of the Wild, like you have all these actions, then your mind is like, oh yeah, what if I do this? What if I knock this barrel over? But in Vampire Survivors, it's what if I hit W, A, S, or D? Because that is your only inputs. So you're right. I think when you have smaller input or choice variety, your brain can kind of um, propagate it out, and like you're like, all right, I think I've seen everything this game has to offer. And actually, very similarly, I played Call of Duty. I haven't played Call of Duty since maybe 2 decades ago, really. And I played about 2 hours. And of course, the game. I mean, the core gameplay is certainly, it's fun. It's tight. It's everything works well. But after I tried out every map once, I said, I think I've seen everything this game has to offer. So even though that game also has, huge, of course, huge input, you can always get better. Uh, I too did not care necessarily to keep getting better. And if I were younger, I'm sure I would have played it a lot longer. But at this point, I mostly care to just see new things and be surprised.
Yeah, like when we're talking about new maps, there are we just talking about multiplayer stuff, like just in co-op or multiplayer in general, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just playing multiplayer. I will give campaign and co-op another run. I definitely was way more surprised in that realm than in multiplayer
No,
PvP.
and I feel the same way in a lot of those cycles too, because I think a big portion of it is what am I getting out of this, right? Like for us, I think it's like we're playing for the individual, like what comes next. But in those cases, we're actually playing like when you're really playing those games, you're playing a micro game, right? You're playing a game within a game. You're playing, I'm actually the big baddie boss. Everybody here is gonna get fucked up, dude. I'm gonna fuck up every one of these fucking these people around me. I'm the boss ass baddie, right? And in doing so, I'm playing my own micro game of how good can I be? How good is my KDA? Can I play games and tricks on people? Can I run around a corner and then I know map knowledge and I can hide in a little side bit and then pop out and beat somebody that runs past me that they thought that I just continued around a corner, and ha ha ha, look how much I outsmarted these apes, right? These individuals, these other players. And that cognition there can really drive in a lot of the competitiveness. This idea of go, 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 go. Within this cycle, I need to be as good as possible. Within this level structure, I need to be as good as possible. With this gun, I need to be as good as possible. And those micro games and those micro adjustments then that we do make to try to make our play better, more optimal, and more interesting, and more vibrant in those things, right? So that we have a better measurement of success within there is different, I think, when we, for individuals and for us, right? Like I don't think that you can necessarily look at Call of Duty's macro game and in multiplayer and derive a lot of like intrigue from that. But if you can find it in the individual of my play style trumps your play style, and I can just bury every single one of these people out here and have that real competitive mindset, That's where the cycle really comes in. And that's why I think then, like, the Warzone stuff really resonates, right? With this hyper competitive audience of people. It's like, how do I be number one? I'm number one every single time that I play a multiplayer game. But 8 people in the lobby can't all think that they're number one, right? So there needs to be some splashback there. And then Warzone gives you a hard, solid realization of, like, oh, I was in this situation, and I was in this area, and I had this gun set up, and I came 20th. Teammates. It's everybody else. Right? Like, but in the back of your mind, you're like, how could I have played more optimally? How could I have outsmarted my opponents? What could I have done with that set of equipment, that set of guns, that set of armor when my health was low, when there was 4 people around me in 2 different groups? Should I have stayed low and stayed quiet? Should I have actually picked up in that situation? I'm 1v4ing. Should I have picked up the stealth mod that I missed 10 minutes ago at that other village? And how could have that have built in to optimize this play style here, right? And we build that macro, or that micro of optimization that goes down. But that's a very competitive mindset that not everybody has. It's hard these days to just jump in and just have fun in a competitive game, right? Because you just get kind of beat down.
Yeah.
You die a few times, and I shoot some people, and like, but if you don't feel that tingle of like, I want to shoot every single person in the head, I want to kill every single person that's on this battlefield. Anybody who faces me, I'm going to murder every single one of them, and I'm going to do it in the most spectacular way, like Michael Jordan. Like, I don't. It gets lost. I think the game gets a little lost.
Right. And one reason we're even talking about this is we were before we started the podcast was we were talking about the general ideas of play and what we engage in. And one thing I wanted to say, especially if you look up more about the predictive processing theory, is that people is that these two things are two sides of the same coin. You are always intrigued by something and then asking, what if I use the rocket launcher and then play this way in Call of Duty? But also in Vampire Survivors, I'll speak from my perspective. I was constantly asking, what if I do a boomerang build? What if I do a Molotov build and do this instead? So you're always trying to intrigue a player, but then once they have all the answers, they will probably get close to quitting. But that's why PvP works so well, because the answer means you have to be number one for a long time. That's the only time you're going to be bored. You're constantly meeting more and more difficult challenges and questions. So
Yeah.
that it works for them.
And look, I'm just gonna one shot this, and I'm gonna draw it out and share the screen, because I don't know if I've ever done this with you before, right? But the idea of, can I show you the mental model, right? Like,
Yeah.
can I actually cognitively give that to you? I think
Go for it. You got like 10, 15 minutes.
Are you serious? That's it? Oh my god. Alright. So I'm sharing my Figma over here, okay? Just gonna make this a little bigger for myself. Yeah, let's do it this way. Sorry, everybody, this is unwatchable. Okay. So, when we're talking about the mental model by itself, I think of it as like a grid, right? In one way and in one aspect, we have all of our senses, right? We have our hearing, our sight, our memory, we have our feel, touch. We have everything that drives into our cognitive load, and our cognitive that drives like intrigue within our cognitive load. Trying to like look through my game field book really, really hard here, right? So we have these things called cognitive processors, perceptual processors, and motor processors, right? So from a perceptual version, it's like, what is coming at me, right? What is coming through my senses? Cognitive, how do I interpret that? And then motor processes, how do I then react and then move along to then create that cycle, right? And in an entire times, what we're talking here is like, I'm interacting with the computer. But in general, this is what we do in life all the time. We're constantly taking in senses, we're constantly trying to make understanding of those things, and we're constantly then trying to react or do something else around
Right,
those,
because you're
right?
just like a few pixels to me, but obviously my mind is like I'm talking to a real person.
Right. I, I hope so.
Uh-oh.
uh, so I've also spelled this wrong, but like I'm dyslexic as fuck, so go fuck yourselves, everybody. So when we're children, right, when we're very small, our grid is very small, right? We have a very direct line to our emotions within these sides, right, on the other side of the thing. So our senses and those inputs drive emotion. And how we then take that and interpret those emotions and how what we want to do about those things is what then continues to change our movement forward within that aspect. So I'm just going to move that out of here. So when we're children, that math is very simple, right? Like if I'm hungry, I may even have less emotions overall. I might just have sadness and happiness. But later on, nappy, fuck me. But later on, that model, as I get older, and as I input into that model grows. It gets bigger. I might get more access to a wider range of emotions. I might get better understanding of how do I process my own senses. So now all of a sudden I might have cognitive processors that go and say, well, actually, this block over here is now all about processing sense when I'm in some position. And these might be less binary. Whereas our original might have just been a very clear mapping of ones
Right.
and zeros, right? Input to output. If I'm feeling this way and I haven't had this thing, I instantly go straight to that emotion, and that's how my brain does the math. Later on, then I start expanding that, and I might end up getting formulas. I might end up in positions where all of a sudden, like, no, I'm actually going to take that sense and I'm going to interpret it a little bit more. Like I want to go and like cycle on that a little bit more. So we end up in this cyclical process of, okay, well maybe like this thing talks to here, but that's not now a 1. It's actually x plus the y, where this was y. And that, and now x is actually coming from some other process of z, divided by 2, or like I over-index or I less index into this, and that gives me x. Now all of a sudden, okay, well then those things are now a process of a formula of that, and then that drives into a heuristic of emotion rather than a straight direct mapping of emotion. And in doing so, then we take that feedback and we heuristic it, right? And when I keep saying that, as I mean it's an iterative cycle. So we're on, depending on how old you are, depending on how many times you've gone through this, depending on how many times you've interacted with this mental model, you could be at iteration 1, or you're at iteration n. You don't know where you are, right? Or like, over time, you're increasing that bias, right? You're moving down those things. What games give us, and when we talk about interesting choice and we talk about being able to get new stuff, is we're talking about this is my world map, right? So this is my mapping for the real world and how I interact with it, which is going to be a massive model by itself. But all of a sudden, a game like an idle game comes over, and then I go and say, well, this mapping doesn't make sense for there.
Yeah.
right? So now all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, like the map is as big as my ability to interpret is, which comes from me, myself, like how I interact, like all of the decisions that I make, and you tell me that I suck, and then I will take that as like either that, you know, like how sad I feel or how much I value that opinion is based off of how much I interpret into this model, how I've ranked you, how I've ranked your opinion in this model. But games give me a whole new model. And now all of a sudden I go and say, well, our goal is still happiness. I still want to feel happy, but I'm able to feel sad about different things. But if I'm feeling sad about a point in a video game, well, great. Why am I feeling sad? Go back to the base model. Okay, what did I do wrong? How am I interpreting that? How am I getting into that world? And then how am I filling out that model over time? And as soon as then players get to a point where like, all right, well this is now that's the processor for this, and like when I'm in position X, then I go and do Y, and then all of a sudden this is here. Now all of a sudden I have a much more fundamental mapping, and I'm able to drive to here a lot quicker, more efficiently, more with better understanding. But I might get very bored of that now that I've filled out the box. So I might go and say, okay, well I need another game. And then what is that game? And now it's a survival game. Well, okay, well now a survival game's a little different than an idle game, right? Like, and the cycle continues. And I have to jump into that world to be able to interact with it. If I can poke and prod and push on it within my own mind, like as it gives me feedback, as it interacts with me, then I can go and continue to increase that model and continue to increase that thing. But here is where I churn, right? And the intrigue of a new model, trying to understand a new model and trying to build into that mapping is what is going to continually keep me engaged, right? Like that's where that is. And it's also about how much value do you put into that model within the hierarchy of models. If you think of these as layers, right? I drive a car. So every time I drive a car, I am perceiving with my body towards the boundaries of the vehicle. I've increased my perception field to the feeling of the steering wheel. I've taken that as now a sensory input, and I've mapped it into this new thing because it's new by itself. I feel the tires. I might be part of the car then at that moment, right? Where my perception is the car, and everything the car is telling me is giving me that feedback, and I know that my goal state is still get to the shops, right? But how I get there and how the car is feeling and the cars around me and everything else like that interact with this model to tell me how quickly can I do that? How efficiently can I do that? How safely can I do that? How much enjoyment can I get out of that car ride? It's too cold in here, I need to turn on the AC. How do I turn on the AC? Well, now we got to figure that out, right? Now we look at these things. So it's like the mechanics of the car become part of their own mapping, and then we can go and interchange those maps with other things later on. If I see one car, do I see another car and say, well, I already have a map for cars, so I'm just going to apply that map. Now all of a sudden becomes that micro integrations where I'm saying, okay, well, this actually, like on my car is like, well, when this happens, I get X as the answer, and when this happens, I get Y as the answer, and this one over here is Z plus Y plus some random number, some other thing of just like how I'm feeling on the day, right? Like, I think that I don't know what I just did, but you mean that to me is the cognitive processor of humans, of just in general life, and this idea of evolution and emotional, with states within all of these things. Why do I jump to those conclusions when I'm pressed with these values? And it's because I have sensors on the left and I have emotions across the top. I have higher ranked emotions of how I want to feel at all times. I want to feel happiness at most times throughout my thing. So the model is always trying to drive towards that as a goal. And it's, to me, it's I mean, saying it's as simple as that is, a little much, right? But like, that's what we say when we're getting into a new game, or like why I would play, interact with, or watch, or do anything. So I'm just trying to update that model, and I've ranked that model, and I'm now churning on that math within my own brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's a super good breakdown. I'm glad you put the visual up because we're probably going to talk about this a lot more. So we might have to save that Figma off in all its 2 minute drawing glory. But yeah, you pointed out how it always feeds to fun and the feeling of fun, and I wanted to give it's sort of my theory, but I feel like from what you've read, it probably lines up. But why do we feel fun when we're kind of learning about these systems that intrigue us and that we poke at us? And I think from a anthropology perspective, or at least evolutionary psychology, if you are if you see a system that you're uncertain about and intrigued about, and you poke at it or you play with it, you're going to learn more about it. You're going to learn more about the world, and it feels fun. So if we have this positive emotion and that drives us to learn about everything about our world, then that's what's going to happen. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be able to manipulate your world better and predict it better, and succeed in life better. So that's why we play. Why mammals play is to hunt better. Why humans play a lot more complicated, but we play. It feels good and it makes us better. And do I match up with the book? I hope I do. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
A big
excellent.
and a yes, like this is the reasons why we play. So I have a number of books on this. Books from the 1980s that or sorry, 1967, written by Suzanne Miller, called Why We Play. She goes through an entire study all the way back to like the 1600s, and then works through up to her modern day time of why we play. And a lot of it starts off with that, but a lot of it started off with just like children need to expel energy, therefore they do things. It's like, okay, you know what I mean? A rough side, yes, but like not necessarily. Like in anthropological forms, we play in cultural aspects to build community, and in doing so, that we everybody drives together closer, and everybody drives because of that. We're able to have happiness within our life model ourselves, right? The world is harsh. You know what I mean? If you are part of the hunter gatherer pack, did you get meat today? Well, how many days have you guys gone without food? Well, all of a sudden now we got to kill. So it's it's festival time. Now it's get the people around. Now it's bring the drums out. Now it's thank our overlords, or the bountiful thing that allowed us to have this. And in playing in with the bow, in playing with the stone, in playing with the things, we get better at being able to be more successful. And that's the evolutionary, so point of it all. It's like the more that man can manipulate the world around them, and is comes from an overarching understanding of that world. The further physics pushes down in through, from just general atoms to electrons to neutrons, to understanding how to pull those things apart, to then on like finding out like, holy shit, did you know about these fucking quark things, and they're fucking ones and zeros at the same, like, what the fuck is this shit, and they're somehow loosely tethered to some other bullshit somewhere else out in the world, and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? And I'm like, yeah, but that's it's there. It's like, because you've pushed that model further, right? You've tried to build this understanding, and that I think in general is all animals. You know what I mean? Fucking, I mean, this gets into like heady discussions, but like people really want to go and believe that humans have this soul, and we're better than every other creature out there because we have gods and we were put here for some reason. It's like, nah, we're fucking meat bags that have just like had a lot of iterations that are beyond your generation. You know what I mean? Like there have been how many generations and iterations of just human, and how that their mental model of the world and their understanding of the world has then built in over time to our understanding of the world. And a shared knowledge base has then increased everybody's mental mapping, theoretically, hopefully, but education's a little bit
Yep.
fucking shitty, right, at the same time, too. But has given us a deeper breadth of that mental model. So our starting points are very different now. Our starting points are not necessarily, as babies, cognition wise, they're very small. But we're able to like very directly hone, interact with that child, give them very clear instructions, and we have real educational standards to those things so that we can increase that model faster, theoretically making more and more well-rounded human beings, or more understanding human beings. More human beings are more capable of understanding the breadthities of what the world is around them, and that just to me is just part and part of games and play. Like we're just constantly trying to chip at any little piece and grab any little things like, oh yeah, okay, that one's kind of tasty, right? Well, that one, okay, but that's kind of interesting. But it might be a complete and utter distraction from things. But hey, if I'm playing the car game, and I'm racing around the place, and I'm building my mental map for that, to then go and say I'm gonna go out and do a track day this weekend. Well, like feel is different. The but we have some perception of what that model is beforehand. I know theoretically how I need to take the corner. I'm not completely starting at a complete baseline nothing. And that ability to build mental maps that don't necessarily translate directly to the real world, but translate to the world within that game, allows us to sit in there, churn, fill something out, and then come pull ourselves back out and then be like, what did I really learn here? Maybe I learned nothing, but maybe I got something out of it, you know? It still always maps back to those emotions.
Yeah. I often say the story, but the very first time I spun out on snow, I magically corrected it with my feet and hands. I had no idea what I was doing, but I spun out so many times in Gran Turismo and magically transferred. I was pretty impressed.
I was laughing. That one time I spun out on snow, I'm like, this means something completely different. That's so funny.
Yeah, but to kind of wrap this up, as a almost a meta commentary on what we're talking about in terms of learning as a species. Um, so the serious study of games, maybe 30, maybe only 20 years at best. It is such a new field, and we're talking about these theories. I mean, I'll definitely admit it doesn't have like immediate takeaways. This isn't top 10 tips and tricks. You're not going to have maybe an immediate takeaway from it. But like we're talking about with play and learning, I guarantee you, if you keep thinking on these topics and studying it, you will get better. It's a lot like working out. Like you work out for a day, you're definitely not going to see anything. But you keep doing it for months and you will see something. So I think it's very much worth thinking about deeper topics. You'll understand games better and innovate more safely because you're not just doing a crapshoot. You're seriously thinking about things now.
Yeah. And oftentimes, you'll feel bad in the first couple of times that you do something, right? But that's just you because you're hitting fail states in your mental model because you just don't have the answers. You don't have the formulas yet. You're just putting numbers in at random at first, and you're doing that by sitting yourself in that world, and it's just going to end up into those sadder characters. But once you recognize that, you recognize those failed states, that's how we improve, right? Then all of a sudden, okay, now I've got the grasp. Like this, in Ireland we always had this
Push
idea
yourself.
of getting the handle of something, right? Once you get the handle of something, now you're in it. Now you can understand it. Now you can manipulate something, right? And to get to there, you got to push and pull a little bit, and and hopefully you either like that or you don't, and that's when then we can subset and pick and choose. Do we even want to fill that model out? Do we care? And some people might say yes, and that's some people might say no. Who knows? But fuck idle games. These fucking games, dude. It's so bad.
I can't wait for a multiplayer Vampire Survivors. I'm gonna drag you into it. We'll do
I'll
that.
do it. I'll do it. All right, Calvin. thank you so much
Yeah.
for letting me ramble. Appreciate you
Oh,
and
very good stuff.
enjoy yourself, dude. All right.